Hello and welcome to the Footy Interchange. Adam Papalia with you, and looking forward to another big week where we get right around the country and check in all the different states as to what the real issues are going on right around the league. If this is the first time you've tuned in, we certainly do that. We crisscross the footy highways. I do a bit of work for Fox Footy. Very much looking forward to calling the Fremantle and Collingwood game on Thursday night and a bit for 6PR as well, with other games right across the weekend. But my co-host this week is Eliza Reilly. We always get Liz on when everything is going terribly, pretty much, in WA footy, because she's got the inside word on it, Liza. Great to have you here. Can it get any worse? I mean, Fremantle were terrible. West Coast haven't won a game yet. It just continues on.
Honestly, Paps, I'm running out of ways to write that West Coast and Fremantle are bad. It's been 3 years of writing bad articles about the Eagles and how they're going to work their way out of this mess. And Fremantle too, it feels like 1 week you're singing their praises and the next they're right back in the doldrums. So it's becoming a bit of a dire time to be a WA football fan, I think.
Yeah, it's been so up and down with Fremantle in particular. We'll start with them because they've got all the headlines. So a terrible loss to St Kilda. I was doing radio on Friday night after that game, and we had so many calls from people.
Was my grandma one of them?
She may have been.
Yeah. Eileen would have been hot on them.
The phone lines absolutely melted down. The text message line was going, literally had smoke coming off it. There was that many messages coming through of Freo fans not happy with it. What's your read on the situation right now? Are you as doom and gloom as what a lot of the supporters are right now, or is there another message somewhere?
I think the cruel irony of it is I would not be surprised. In fact, I'm expecting them to beat Collingwood on Thursday night. And that will just make what happened against St Kilda even more frustrating for Fremantle fans. It's just this yo-yo team. They've been horrific away from home. Lost to Geelong in round 1 by 78 points. Lost to Melbourne by 10, but it was just the way they played in that game, which was really disappointing. And then to go out against the Saints, who are a team who have, had some good wins this year. They're not to be completely underestimated, but it was knowing what they were walking into. They knew that Ross Lyon wanted to play this defensive lockdown game. They knew that they were probably going to have some attention coming the way of Brayshaw and Sarong, and everything the coaching staff you'd expected, would have predicted, came to fruition, and they had no plan B. They just had to ride it out. Lost Hayden Young in the process, but it was just so disappointing to know that they got beaten by what they know.
Exactly, and not be able to change it in the run. Again, you thought it was 20 points at half time. You thought if they can find a way to fight their way through it in the second half, then perhaps they could get the win. But it ends up blowing out to 60-odd points, and another bad loss on the road. The criticism comes, it starts to pile up, the pressure on Justin Longmuir, which I'm not as strong on as quite a few other people are, I don't think. I mean, there's no point, I don't think, even talking about that too much until you see how the season pans out. We're round 8 at the moment. He's got the job, should be given the opportunity to get them to the finals, and that plays out through the rest of the year. Until there's probably a mathematical chance that they cannot do that, then I don't think you even start having that conversation. But there's a lot of disgruntled fans right now.
Yeah, and the players have been really strong on this in the past 24 hours. Caleb Sarong spoke in a press conference yesterday and said he actually sent JL a text on Sunday and said, mate, we back you, we back your game plan. And the players have taken a lot of the liability, saying that what they're being told to do, what they're being instructed to do in terms of the game plan, they're not actually fulfilling. And that's not on Justin, that's them not setting out to do what he's instructed them to do. So the players have taken a lot of ownership, but what I think we can say is that this is his 6th season now as coach. He's only taken them to 1 final series. This is a group and a list that many believe is capable of a top 4 finish and is absolutely stacked with talent. And history suggests, I wrote about this in an article last year, history suggests if you don't win a flag within your first 5 years, you're not going to do it. This is now his 6th season. It takes, on average, 104 games for a coach to win a grand final, and he's already coached more than 100. And the mean of sort of premiership coaches is around 4 years. So if you can't get it done within that time frame, history suggests that you're probably not going to.
No, it's not good when you line up the stats like that. But I think changing mid-season, which a lot of fans are saying they want to have happen right now. I don't think you can do that right now. And I think everyone needs to just take a bit of a breath. It's a bit of a roller coaster at the moment. But to be honest, it feels a little bit like West Coast in 2016, 2017, where they had a good list and they'd made a grand final, albeit Fremantle haven't done that in recent years, but they'd made the finals. They were expected to do well. And then they were on this roller coaster for a really long time where they'd play exceptionally well at home and then they would travel away and they would struggle. So it's something that teams need to, particularly from WA, need to find a way to fight through and get better at and get that gap between their best and their worst to shorten up. And West Coast had that flat track bullies tag aimed at them for a number of years before it finally clicked, and then they were able to go and win a flag in 2018. That's the challenge, I think, for Fremantle right now, is how can they take that form that they've got at home? And as you said, they might come out and beat Collingwood on Thursday night, and then it falls right into the category of being a dockery performance, which is a term that their fans use a fair bit, where they win ones they're not expected to and lose ones they are. If they can bridge that gap, I just feel like it's not wholesale changes that need to be made. It's that little tweak around the margins, and their best is good enough. They just don't do it often enough right now. But I don't think it takes a lot for them to get to that point where they can do that consistently. Am I being too optimistic here? I'm not sure.
The players have spoken about this. They said, we asked them directly yesterday, why is there such a disparity between your home form and your away form? Because your three worst losses this year have come in Melbourne. And Caleb Strong sort of said, it's something we're looking into. We're constantly digging into this because last year they travelled quite well. We remember, and in previous years they've gone to Geelong and beat Geelong. They've gone to Sydney and beat Sydney. Like, this isn't a team that completely crumbles in the past, at least when they're away from home. They rise to that challenge rather than fall flat. So it's going to be fascinating to see if they do change things up. I think that travel routine, sort of travelling the 2 days out, has worked for them really well in the past, but I guess the reality of the situation is this Fremantle job is probably the job any coach would want in football, and that's why I think we're seeing so much pressure squared at Justin Longmuir, because you've got a Group 1 class of coaches currently sitting there who don't have jobs or are about to be out of the job at the end of the year, who would absolutely jump at the chance to be the next head coach at the Fremantle Dockers.
Yeah, I just think judgment needs to be reserved for a few more weeks yet, at least. Get through to the second half of the season and see where Fremantle are placed. If they can go on a bit of a run, shown in the AFL at the moment, you can jump up the table really quickly. Massive month coming up for them with the fixtures that they've got. Made even harder because Hayden Young is going to be out for an extended period of time. What's the latest you know about that? And how does that then change their setup in the midfield, and who's next in line?
It's disastrous, to be honest, to have no Hayden Young, who was such a revelation in that midfield last year and probably one of the big reasons they were in top 4 contention right up until the last month of the season, because they have absolutely craved a big-bodied midfielder to sort of sit around stoppages, and if they're not winning the footy themselves, they're blocking and creating space for others in the midfield, and that's what Nat Fyfe and Hayden Young were to Fremantle last year. Now both of them have hamstring injuries, and Young's hamstring injury is going to see him have surgery today, speaking on Tuesday of this week, and he's going to be out for multiple months. There is hope that he could return before the end of the season, but in the meantime, no Jago O'Meara as well, who sort of has been playing that wing role, but he's capable of playing inside midfield. No timeline last week on his injury. So it leaves the door open for someone like a Neil Erasmus or a Will Brody, who've been consistently starved of opportunities in this Fremantle midfield, but now the door is absolutely flung open for those two guys, or one of them, to come in and stamp their mark on this midfield.
Erasmus has been given the nod ahead of Brody in the last little while. Will we see Will Brody come back into the team? It feels like his card has been marked for quite some time, and it seems like no matter what he does at waffle level, he's not going to get back into that team. But for a side that wants to win a few clearances, he might help that given last weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of them didn't play at their best in the waffle on the weekend. They didn't exactly bang the door down. So it's going to be really interesting to see where this selection plays out. But Will Brody is just remarkable to think about how in 2022, when they made it to a semi-final, he was one of the key players in that midfield. He's had his knocks on him, probably not as versatile as some of the others they've got going through there, and his transition hasn't been to the levels of the Sarong or Brayshaw either, but at the same time, his first give handballs, his ability to take the tackle and open up a teammate, those sort of things, and that big frame in the midfield are going to be crucial to Fremantle's hopes, I think, this season, because we saw what happens when Sarong and Brayshaw are targeted and how quiet they were and the impact it had.
Certainly. Collingwood are making significant changes to their side coming across to the west, which is something I reckon we see too much of when we see some of the...
Well, they don't know how to travel, Paps.
No,
so, like,
well,
it's just airplanes. What?
It's not just Collingwood I was sort of getting at. I think a lot of times teams, when they think, we've got to go to Perth, how terrible is that? They rest senior players or players that have a bit of a niggle. They're like, we won't get them on the flight. It must be a nice luxury to have as opposed to travelling every second week. But it opens the door again for Fremantle to put in a strong performance at home. Collingwood down on manpower, even though they lost last week. They'll be pretty keen to get a win. But they're not going to be at full strength this week.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no Myercheck, he's injured this week. No DeGoey, who has looked a bit underdone for a few weeks now. Pendlebury, of course, and Maynard. So they're 4 crucial players to Collingwood's, best 22 and have been strong performers this season. So the door is definitely ajar for Fremantle. And it's funny, Lockie Schultz has obviously gone over there and was a docker for a while. He's sort of spoken a bit in the media about how whenever the teams and, Collingwood have to come to Perth, he's sort of saying like they start preparing like 4 weeks out for like a 3-hour plane trip. And he just said the parallels are so hilarious to be on the other side of that now. So we'll see if that month of prep has helped the Collingwood Magpies. But I think those couple of names have probably been circled for a while now.
Well, they said they target it a fair way out, as you said, Eliza, and try to manage those players through as they go. We're obviously talking a fair bit of WA stuff off the top because we've got Eliza Reilly here with us from Code Sports co-hosting today. Let's switch to West Coast. Feels like more of the same. They've had a 10-minute period before half-time where they're able to kick a bunch of goals and actually have the lead, amazingly, despite all the stats on the weekend. And then Max Gawn runs over the top of them and really dominates that game. Massive game this week. Chance to possibly get their first win. Won't be easy against the Tigers. Have to travel away at the MCG. It'd mean a lot to Andrew McQualter, though, if he could actually get that first win up against the side that he was the interim coach for.
Yeah, especially because of the way he sort of found out that he'd lost that job. I think he found out from the radio. He didn't even receive a phone call from anyone at the club. It was actually reported on radio, and that's how he found out he'd missed out on that senior job. So there is not, I wouldn't say bad blood, but he would be, as you said, desperate to get the win. And I think it's going to be a pretty decent assessment of how these two rebuilds are going and how these two different approaches are going, because West Coast have sort of done the slow, took a while to admit they were rebuilding, have tried to keep senior players to be that bridge between the younger generation, have brought in experience from other clubs, whereas Richmond just went, we're completely bottoming out, we're taking top-end draft picks, and it's sort of like the fastest way to the bottom versus a slow, steady approach. Which one's going to come out on top and which one's going to get back into premiership contention faster? I think this game's going to tell us a bit about that.
Certainly will. And the Tigers, of course, have got a couple of wins on the board and look really good in a couple of games, but really poor in some other ones. For the Eagles, though, they've got some injury issues with Jeremy McGovern going into did he go into the HIA on the weekend? I'm not sure we actually got 100% confirmation on that, but going to miss this week, you would think. And Archer Reid rolling an ankle too. So is he able to play through that this week? Oscar Allen, does he stay back with McGovern out? Can they get him back forward? What's your read on that situation? Because I've been pretty strong on the fact, I think, if you want to play at your best and West Coast have their best chance of winning, Oscar Allen is a forward for me.
Well, they might not have much choice this week with no McGovern, and I think Harry Edwards, from memory, missed the game on the weekend in the Waffle with a bit of an ankle complaint. I think Andrew McQualter said post-game, so that's two key defenders, they're down. Sandy Brock's obviously in the mix as well, but Archer Reid got through a little bit of training this morning from all reports. It looked pretty scary initially there when he first went down, but it looks like Oscar will be required in defence yet again, because if you don't have him, you're sort of leaning on a a Sandy Brock, or even a Rhett Bazzo, who hasn't played a whole lot of footy in the past few years. So as much as I know you want to see him kicking goals again, I just don't think that's going to be a feasible reality for West Coast this week.
Yeah, they don't seem to be able to have that flexibility at the moment. Their injury list has been pretty short for the most part through the start of this season. Elliot Yeo, obviously the one missing the main part so far. But Oscar Allen's still that interesting question for the Eagles as to where he plays throughout the rest of the season. Eliza, great to get all your expertise on the WA teams. Let's kick it around the country, though, as we check out what is going on in each and every state as we look at all the footy issues right here on the Footy Interchange. The Footy Interchange, well, let's head to Victoria and, of course, have a chat to Drew Jones from Fox Sports and from Goat Fantasy as well. I'm wondering how your team is going. We'll check and talk a bit of fantasy news with Drew very, very shortly. But, mate, we cross to you. For those that are watching on YouTube can see that you are actually out on location. Where have you been today? I know there's been an AFL announcement.
G'day, guys. Yeah, I'm in a car park, which is where every AFL reporter loves to be. But no, I've just been at the AFLW season launch announcement. So season 10 getting underway, 100 days until bounce down for the women. And it'll be Collingwood and Carlton, and they're revisiting that memorable first ever game of AFLW where it was a lockout here at Icon Park. So, a couple of the stars, Ruby Slicer and Brianne Harrington here to build up to the game. But I think the overlay to this today was that the players are back at pre-season training and they don't have a fixture yet. So the AFL sort of having to defend themselves a little bit, or the AFLW defending themselves a little bit as to why there's no fixture in place yet outside of this opening game. So the backstory to that is that they are hoping to line up more double headers to start the season, but they haven't quite worked out what those last couple of rounds are going to look like for the men. So over the next 2 weeks, they map out that, then work out if they can get some double headers in to start the season at these tier 1 venues. So, exciting stuff.
I get it. I get the reunion to the first ever match of AFLW, but I don't think Collingwood and Carlton are a rivalry anymore. They both didn't make finals last year. The only thing I'm excited about, number 1 pick, Ash Centra debut in prime time. That'll be marquee viewing. But besides that, I think we have better rivalries in the AFLW now.
Yeah, and also, I was going to say, it's a rivalry, but it's not currently a good rivalry when you look at the quality around the league.
And what about the Dogs? Let's get started on them. Obviously, Bailey Dale, Bailey Smith. There's a fair bit happening at the kennel. Talk us through it.
Oh, yeah, huge. I was really excited to go to speak to Luke Beveridge today, and he drew a decent crowd. But he was just so measured and calm. It was not what we wanted when we went out there. So he said he wasn't surprised by the fact that the AFL didn't meter out a punishment for Willie Reilly. I mean, this has been talked about so much, and clearly he's going through things behind the scenes. But the Bulldogs, while initially they were very shocked about what happened, I think Bailey Dale has made it clear to them, and they're probably happy off the back of this to try and just move past it. And this is a Port Adelaide issue. This is a Willie Reilly issue. Ultimately, there's probably not too much skin off Dale's nose. They're fighting, for top 4, and they're trying to win a flag. So they've got other things to worry about. So from that perspective, that's all fine. But the Bailey Smith thing, that's going to continue to hang around for at least the next couple of weeks. It's turned in now to a 3-week extravaganza as we build up to that fixture at GMHBA Stadium after he took that little jibe at the Dogs on Saturday night. Interesting, Bevo was really effusive with his praise of Smith today and how well he's playing this season and how good it is to see him in a good place. But ultimately, I think Baz just couldn't help himself. He wants to be the centre of attention. He is box office. And because he's playing so well, the filter was gone, as Bevo said today. He's unfiltered. That's just how he rolls, and happy to take a shot at the Dogs as we build up to round 11.
I think we enjoy that, don't we? A little bit of banter and a little bit of back and forth. It's going to make that game, as you said, Drew, in a couple of weeks so appealing, and I think everyone will be watching that. Luke Beveridge himself, still a lot of talk about and speculation about his coaching future and his contract, but he's getting the results right now.
Yeah, so I was lying in bed last night thinking about, this is what I do, a football nerd. I was thinking about how can I phrase these questions to Luke to get to unlock an answer from him. So the first year I was in Melbourne as a reporter, the Dogs won the flag, and I feel like we've followed them closely almost every year since, seeing can they repeat? Can they get the best out of their gun players like Bontempelli and Libber and Norton? They've all been around for so long. this is the first year where I've seen them up close that I've felt like they've got everything aligned. It feels like it's better balanced. And that even though there's these outside things happening, there's injuries, there's controversy, Jamara, they're still managing to stay on course and it's not affecting their football. I thought they were great the first 4 or 5 weeks with injuries. And now that they've got their players back, with still more to come back, they're really on a roll now. And I think that Bevo knows that. And I think now he's locked in, can see that the potential of the group is really high. And I'm certain that he would want to sign a contract and stay for a period of time. It's now sort of in the club's hands to come forward with that deal. Maybe it happens in the back half of the year, but I feel like we're trending towards Luke staying.
Drew, what about Clayton Oliver? Obviously missed the trip west to play the Eagles, but was he back at training this morning?
He was, yeah. So went through the session with the players out at Casey today. So speculation about his future has just rumbled right back up. So, where there's smoke, there's fire. Clearly he's frustrated about a lack of game time, particularly through the midfield. I can't speak to how Clayton's feeling about that myself, but I know that Melbourne have such a high value on him and they saw him as such a key person to get happy, to get right, to have playing really good football as part of what they were hoping would be a resurgence. If something has changed, it's had to have changed in the last few weeks as far as how Melbourne are feeling about Clayton at the club. So interested to see how Simon Goodwin speaks about this week because he's been so, I guess, laser focused on like Clayton is a Melbourne person and a Melbourne player. So I'm very fascinated to see if that has changed.
And as we look at fantasy news for your AFL fantasy teams, Drew, Goat Fantasy, if you want to check it out. Apart from just trying to get Max Gawn into your team by any means necessary, what else should we be looking at?
Yeah, it's just so hard to get to the top right now. Perhaps that's what I've really noticed this week going through, looking at potential upgrades. There's not a lot of bargains right now in fantasy football. Maybe Henry Huswaite's the only one from Hawthorn who's got that midfield role with a few out through the middle, but he is just a short-term play. So one option you have is to take, say, a Xavier Lindsay or a Sam Lawler and just move them to Henry Huswaite this week because he'll actually generate you some cash and potentially some points on field in the midfield. But I'm just going to throw one out for you. Harry Sheasel is racking them up. We would all love to have Harry in our team, but who's it affecting? Caleb Daniel. He's not getting the same amount of ball down back with Harry dominating those possessions out of the back half. I'm going to say, if you can find some cash, try and get Caleb up. Get him up to Marcus Bontempelli. Get him up to Dacos. Get him up to like a super premium. Is that your way to a Max Gawn? Is that your way to a Tristan Cherry? That's got to be a consideration this week because there's not many who are sitting in that 700, 800, 900 bracket who are worth bringing into your team. So that's just one for you.
Brilliant stuff. Goat Fantasy News if people want to check it out and keep across everything. Drew, as always, mate, great to chat.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Drew Jones there with the latest out of Victoria. The Footy Interchange as we head to South Australia, and Sim Thomas-Wilson is from the Adelaide Advertiser and from Code Sports as well, and he joins us to talk all things South Australian footy. Sim, great to chat to you again. We're a bit like us in the West. Some of the teams on a bit of a roller coaster ride this year. Port Adelaide, let's talk about them. That was a disastrous trip to Ballarat for them.
Hey guys, yeah, no, thanks for having me. Yeah, that was just a bad day for them. That might have even been worse than round one against Collingwood, given they actually had Zach Butters back. They had some guys, coming back from injury. Like that was, again, even though they started well, they just were outworked by the Bulldogs, and it just, again, they lost heavily. Second time this year by 90 points.
And Sim, there's obviously been a bit of talk about Willie Reilly this week. I feel like it's been mostly resolved by now, but can you talk us through the sort of sequence of events and whether we can expect anything perhaps to spill out on the field this weekend?
Yeah, so an interesting start to showdown week here. One you wouldn't expect. Just with Willie's interchange regarding Bailey Dowd, who is Bulldogs teammate. So it seems like from the club's perspective, from the AFL's perspective, whether you agree or not, that no action's going to be taken now that Willie apologised to Bailey Dale. But yeah, I do know that Port have pretty much read him the right act almost. They've been like, stop, counselled him on his use of social media, especially after what we saw a couple of weeks ago after the Gather Round game where he posted about Hawthorn. So I think that's going to be a bit of an ongoing watch with him. Hopefully for Port and for Willie's sake, we don't see any more of this. But yeah, it's becoming a bit of an issue for them.
What's it feeling like in Adelaide in a showdown week where two teams have got big expectations? The Crows obviously going pretty well, so a bit different to the last few years.
Yeah, for the first time since 2019, the Crows are favourites, so we haven't been in this situation for a while. Even though they've got a really good record in showdowns of late, they actually come into this game as favourites. They had a really good win against Carlton. They were really impressive. Jordan Dawson bounced back. Their forwards looked good. Their defence was great. So, yeah, I think all eyes are going to be on the Crows and whether they can actually, they can, I guess, take this favouritism into the game and win it. Because if they do, if they beat Port Adelaide, I know Port are 4-4, but their run is so hard. They need to win games like this to be a chance of making finals.
It feels like it might be one of those old-fashioned showdown ambushes, given that Port's coming off a terrible loss and they'll be fired up at the start. So I reckon the first 10 minutes is going to be pretty good to watch.
Yeah, definitely. We had the usual captain's presser yesterday, and it was pretty boring. We normally have the teams saying they hate each other or stuff like that. No, it was all respect from Connor Rosie and Jordan Dawson. But I reckon when the game starts, it's going to be quite different.
Nothing going on with teeth being lolly teeth thrown around, or obviously with everything that happened with Dan Houston and Isaac Rankin last year.
Yeah, I don't think Josh Riccielli's going to be saying much in the lead up to this game. And last time it was very interesting because obviously you had Isaac Rankin knocked out by Dan Houston with that bump, and then the Crows just lost their heads. They were just trying to fight Port the whole time. So whether they've learned from that, they can be a bit more mature in the moment because showdowns are always fierce. They're always real. There's always some spice to them. So it's as we always say, it's a cliche, but it doesn't matter where the teams are on the ladder and the form line. When it comes to the showdown, it's game on. So it'll be fascinating. You'd expect Port to respond.
And Sim, I know we like to take things 1 week at a time, or especially the football clubs do, but say Port do have another horrific loss this coming weekend, do questions start to be asked of Ken Hinkley in this successor arrangement and whether it might be sped up perhaps than what we initially forecast?
I think another bad loss that externally will be. Internally, I think I'd expect Port to just keep going with it. Ken's to keep going with it, yeah. So I think for them it'll be a non-issue. I think for us though, because of just how they're playing and how heavily they're getting beaten, it will be spoken about again.
Great stuff, Sim. Enjoy the showdown. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Sim Thomas-Wilson there from the Adelaide Advertiser and from Code Sports. Looking forward to seeing how that showdown actually does unfold. The Footy Interchange as we head to New South Wales and the Battle of the Bridge. A bit of an upset in that one with the Sydney Swans getting it done over the Giants as we head now to Cal Sinclair who joins us. Cal, thanks very much for your time. Did you see that one coming at all? A bit of a shock for everyone, I think, with the Swans really lifting.
Yeah, it certainly was. I think probably everyone penciled in the Giants to take home that win, considering just we've discussed over the last several weeks, probably just the Swans' lack of form and probably just where their injury list is at. But mate, full credit to them. I think one of the big talking points out of the game was Tom McCartan's move to defence. I think the Swans just have to play him there permanently now. I don't think this kind of experiment of him going forward for a half and then going back, into defence soon after that. You just felt like they were a lot more stable off half-back. Guys like Blakey were a lot more comfortable. They could use their run and dash. Lewis Melican just felt a little bit at ease having Tom there. And guys like Dane Rampy don't have to play on the second tall.
Cal, what about the Brett Kirk medal voting? Obviously, Chad Warner got up, but was there two Giants midfielders you would have liked to see get a bit more love?
Chad Warner certainly played an incredible game. It was actually a little bit disrespectful, I thought, of the Giants in that first half. They literally paid him no attention. Like, he was taking marks in the back pocket and then 10 seconds later getting handball receives in the middle of the ground. So his first half was incredible. But I honestly don't know if there'd be a better duo in the competition than Tom Green and Finn Callaghan. Like Tom Green finished with 34 disposals, 17 kicks, 17 handballs, 6 clearances. And then you look at Finn Callaghan, who finished with 33. He had 8 tackles as well, and including 6 clearances and 1 goal assist. So I think I personally thought Finn Callaghan was best on ground. His response in that second quarter was incredible with 13 touches. But I just think where the Giants midfield could do with a little bit of improvement is just where do they go after those two? They've got a little bit of a lack of depth in that midfield stocks. I know Josh Kelly's out, but if I was them at the trade table at the end of the year, I'd be looking to someone to complement those two because they are absolute superstars of the comp.
Just to bolster it up a little bit more. 3 losses in a row now for the Giants, which is certainly very concerning as they head now to Geelong. So where do you feel they're at right now? Because early doors, everyone's thinking, they're going to be a real contender, but they've just had a bit of a stumble.
Yeah, like they're going into a really, really difficult game against Geelong. Like that could notch up your 4th loss in a row, which, to be honest, this team at their best and when they're fully fit, they should really be a top two team on the ladder. Unfortunately, at the moment, I just don't know what that kind of dynamic, but particularly in their forward line, is kind of looking like. As I said, I think the midfield stocks need a little bit of bolstering, but they're just certainly not playing their best football at all. I think what teams are doing to them is that they're actually slowing them down. If you watch them really closely, they actually hate kicking the ball long down the line. They just tend to look for kicks in the corridor. They'll switch if they have to, but they've got this real reluctance to kick the ball long. I think that's probably costing them. They need a big target up forward.
And Cal, what about the package, Jake Stringer? He hasn't quite delivered yet in Orange, but he started as the sub on the weekend. What did you make of that move?
I actually really like the move that a few coaches are doing, of, I guess, giving a more experienced player the sub role for the day. I think what that does, it creates a real injection of energy into the game, and it gives the opposition coaching panel to actually something to think about. Like if Jake Stringer is coming off the bench, pretty fresh, and we all know how much of an impact and burst player that he can be, it tends to be quite concerning. He came on, he impacted with probably 3 goals, which is obviously a great effort as a sub. But I think ideally, if they deployed him probably 20 minutes before that, they still might be in with a shot. But Jake's an interesting one. Can he put together 4 quarters? We all know the football and talent and attributes that he's got. But I think the Giants need him out there for 4 quarters. But it's just a question mark of his fitness and availability at times.
Brilliant stuff, Cal. Always great to chat. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Catch you later.
Cal Sinclair there with everything out of New South Wales. The Swans are heading to take on Essendon, which will be a really interesting clash. I think 2 teams similar-ish in terms of their form lines so far. The Swans trying to get back into it, obviously. And the Giants down to Geelong. It's always difficult task.
They've had some good performances down there in the past, though. So if everything goes right for them, I think they can definitely get up. But as Cal mentioned, that injury list has started to creep up a bit on them.
Latest there out of New South Wales right here on the Footy Interchange. The Footy Interchange. Well, let's head across to Queensland and check in after what was a really intriguing Q clash. Not quite the spectacle we were hoping it would be, but still plenty of storylines to come out of it. Tom Rockliff, of course, 200 gamer in the AFL. Rockliff Finance for all your finance needs joins us. Tommy, thanks so much for your time, mate. Unfortunately, the weather cruelled us a little bit with the Q clash. It was a bit more of a grind than we were hoping to be an absolute belter.
Yeah, it was like a Q clash from about 10 or 15 years ago, wasn't it? It was disappointing. The conditions certainly played some part of that, but the Gold Coast Suns as well, they just went into their shells a little bit and didn't perform the way we've seen. They didn't take the game on. So it turned into a bit of a fizzer, considering it was a top-of-the-table clash and what we're all hoping and expecting from the Gold Coast Suns and the Lions. Lions did what they had to get the job done. But, yeah, Gold Coast Suns pretty disappointing out of that one.
What about their next 2 games? Obviously head up to Darwin. They're home away from home. They've been very successful up there in years gone by. What do you sort of make of this chance to get away and sort of galvanise as a group?
Yeah, they've been super impressive on the road, particularly up in Darwin when they go and spend the week or about 10 days up there. So they need to regroup and bounce back. And, I mean, the Western Bulldogs this week, it's no easy challenge. So if they want to play finals footy, which their form indicates they probably can. I mean, they've only had the 2 losses, one to Richmond and Brisbane Lions now, but they need to bounce back and bounce back in a big way, make sure their midfield gets going. So we've seen Josh Dunkley do a super impressive role on Matty Rowell, taking completely out of the contest, shift to half forward. So I think they individually showed some really good signs this year. As a unit, though, I'm not convinced on them yet. They certainly didn't on the weekend support Matty Rowell through that. So for them to grow as a team and to be that successful finals team that they want to be, they're going to have to start to take care for each other and look outside themselves. So whether it be Anderson or Miller and these guys go to put blocks on and free your stars up, that they're stars in their own right, but they've got to start to work as a unit.
You mentioned Josh Dunkley there, and he's been a great player for a long period of time, but he's one of those, he's a bit unassuming at times, isn't he? I mean, he just sort of flies under the radar a touch, and he can really do a job on a player when he needs to.
Certainly is. I still think he's probably one of the most underrated players in the competition. He functions in that Brisbane Lions midfield as good as anyone. He plays a significant role every week, shadowing the opposition's best midfielder, generally around the stoppages, but finds plenty of the footy himself. So on the weekend, he went away, had 26, 27 disposals himself, kept Matty Rowell to 18 and 1 clearance. And in the second half, Matty Rowell actually had to go to half forward to try and impact the game in some way. So a credit to Josh Dunkley. I'm not sure what the coaches' vote suggested. I haven't picked him up yet yesterday or today, but I'm sure Chris Fagan would have given him 5. And I think Alistair Lynch potentially in the middle, but gave him best on ground. So I think internally he's valued very highly. Externally, we probably don't appreciate how good he is. A 2-time premiership player. He's been impactful at the Western Bulldogs and certainly the Brisbane Lions.
And Fags sort of said after the game that he felt like he would take his team a bit longer to kick into gear this season coming off that premiership. But we look at the ladder and they're 7-1 and it looks like no one's putting a hand on them. Is it theirs to lose again this year?
It feels that way, doesn't it? I know that Collingwood got him a couple of weeks ago, but as spoken about previously on this one, you almost expected it that they would lose that game, a 5-day break. They flew back at midnight from Adelaide on the Saturday night. Collingwood had the extra time to recover. This year, it seems to be more prevalent that if you're on those short turnarounds, it's much harder to back up for whatever reason. That's their only loss. They feel like they're still going in second gear. We haven't seen them play their best footy. It feels like they've sort of fallen behind in a fair few games. And yet we get to the ladder after round 8 and they're on top. They're 7-1 and as good as anyone in the competition. They're well placed again to challenge. This time last year, they're sitting in 15th position. So they don't have to come from behind. They don't have to come from where they were. Now it's just about tinkering on those little things to make sure that their premiership defence is where it needs to be. And it's a pretty even competition, but I think they're the number one standout. And as we sit here today, what is it, May 6th? It's theirs to lose.
Yeah, and as you said, they seem to just be kind of coasting at the moment. They're cruising through, getting wins when they're not maybe playing their best. What if they are to go to that next level? Is there a particular area that you reckon that they could really tweak and that would take them even further ahead of everyone else?
Oh, they complement each other. I think it's probably just playing the full 4 quarters. We've seen them play in bursts. So they put teams away in almost a 20-minute period. We've seen it on the weekend again. Charlie Cameron, who hadn't kicked a goal for 3 or 4 weeks, goes bang, bang within the space of 30 seconds, and then they get their momentum. So the defence is really strong. Their ball movement off half back with Zorko there. And the scary thing is Kitty Coleman looks like he's going to come back in probably this week. Tommy Duday's played a couple of games in the reserves now as well. So they're going to get better again, which is scary. Their forward half functions really well, and their midfield's elite. You've got a 2-time, 3-time Brownlow medalist, Lockie Neal, who's been thereabouts many, many times. I mean, there's not much that you would want to tinker with the game plan. It's just about defining that and playing for longer periods.
A bit scary for everyone else, I think, Tom, given they're a game clear on top of the table right now, mate. As always, really appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Tom Rockliff there, Rockliff Finance, for all your finance needs, and he is our expert over there in the Sunshine State. This is the Footy Interchange. The Footy Interchange as we now get our injury update with Steve Gravina, former physio in the AFL, now front-runner physio in Osborne Park, who joins us each and every week for an update on some of the injuries around the league. Steve, we spoke about Hayden Young off the top of the show about the impact it's going to make to Fremantle's side, but for him, this has got to be really concerning. Bit of a history now of hamstring injuries, and this one's significant given he's going for surgery.
Yeah, it's not so good, mate. He obviously missed a big chunk of the pre-season with 2 hamstring injuries on the opposite side. And so now, a high-grade hamstring injury, involving the tendon, which does require surgery. These ones are minimum 12 weeks to return to play from, and given he's obviously missed a big chunk, he's coming from a really deep hole. So hopefully we do see him at the back end of the year, but no guarantees at this stage.
What about other side of town, Elliot Yeo? Obviously at West Coast, Andrew Coulter spoke post-game about how he's having some hardware removed from his ankle. Can you dumb that down for us at home?
Yeah, it's going from bad to worse for Yowie, unfortunately. So he's had the syndesmosis surgery done following the injury, which the newer, I guess, method that they'll employ would be to drill some holes into each of the lower ankle bones and insert material, like a synthetic material, to act as a bit of a tightrope, almost like, think about fishing line, to pull the two bones into place to hold that top of the ankle joint in place. Then he's returned to run and built up, but only to a point, and the ankles continued to plague him. Look, I'm speculating, but from what I would sort of imagine, the ankle joint just hasn't handled the return to loading. So either the tightrope or the force of that material pulling the bones together is too tight and it's causing irritation, or a little bit of bone stress is developing around the anchor points around the bones where the little screws have been placed to hold the synthetic material in place. But for whatever reason, it hasn't taken well. So back to the drawing board. So they'll go in, remove the little screws, remove the tightrope material, and then have to give Elliot a bit of time off to allow him then to heal up and build up on running. You'd hope that the joint remains stable now that it's been this long since the initial surgery. So the stability of it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But yeah, the overall function of the ankle is still to be determined how it handles it. To be honest, I'd be surprised if we see him this year, just given how lower baseline he's at right now and how long it's going to take to build up. But if he gets a smooth run of it, we might see him at the back end.
Yeah, it's a real blow for West Coast, given he's so important to their team and they're missing someone in the midfield like that. You always get me just moving a little bit uncomfortably in my chair, Steve, when you're giving us detail on those types of things. I'm a bit more squeamish than some, perhaps, but you explained it really, really well. Speaking of squeamish, the Harrison Jones injury on the weekend, which everyone could see, unfortunately, on the telly, looked really nasty.
Yeah, they're as bad as they get on that visual site. So he's landed at an angle through that foot and ankle that it's caused the joint to dislocate. So it's pretty rare. It's even more rare not to fracture the joint or the bones of the joint when you dislocate. So, he's dodged a big bullet there. But it looked pretty bad when it was dislocated on impact and then he's actually taken a step on the dislocated ankle.
No thanks.
Again, sorry to break it down like that. But look, yeah, it's a nasty injury. He's dislocated the joint, which means he's really ripped through a lot of the ligaments and connective tissue. So a lot of that's going to need time to heal. From what I understand, it doesn't require surgery and no major fractures. So that's a really good thing. But there's been huge trauma to a big weight-bearing joint. So we need to respect the healing process there. And it's going to be months until we see Harrison again towards the back end of the year. And, you do hold your breath that everything goes smoothly on the way back. But with new architecture in terms of scar tissue laying down around those old ligaments, you just don't know. So as these guys build up, they are quite high risk to developing overload issues around there with bone stress and other ongoing inflammatory reactions. And then you've got to be concerned with, the soft tissue preparation for these guys. And you're always in the same boat in this situation, that they don't come back and then all of a sudden they're deconditioned through calves and hammies and start having soft tissue injuries.
Yeah.
But yeah, a long road for both of them.
Certainly is. I like how you try to soften it for us a little bit by saying tightrope and architecture and things like this. The last one I wanted to ask you about, Collingwood, so they're going to be managing quite a number of players coming across to play in Perth this week, which we see, I reckon, quite a bit from some of the interstate teams out of WA, the Victorian teams particularly. What's the philosophy, do you think, in AFL land, and you've been on the part of it at West Coast where you've been trying to manage teams through that travel every second week, but other teams that have the luxury of only travelling once every 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it is, seem to take a very measured approach and really plan for these things from a long way out?
Yeah, they sure do, and I think it probably benefits them that they're doing pretty well towards the top of the ladder. So they've got the luxury of being able to rest a few guys on the way through. But yeah, the 5-day break with a travel and a long haul travel is the real kicker in that situation. So the veteran athletes basically don't handle high speed running within a shorter period of time. So the dose of high speed running that you get in a game is much more than you would get in training. So for you to do that on a Saturday and then have to back up the following Saturday, the guys are conditioned to do that. But then to do that, with a 5-day break, as we get older, our bodies just aren't that good at recovering to be able to handle those loads again. And it's not even just the game that you'll play over here, but it's the month afterwards where then all of a sudden you're carrying more fatigue than you otherwise normally would, and you remain high risk for the couple of weeks after that. So getting proactive and managing a couple of the guys where you can is a really good way to go about it. You save the travel for these guys where you're maximising a down week where you've been able to plan for that and get better sleep quality, get a bit of a rest before you build up again. But it's the combination of less days to recover from, and then the accumulation of fatigue that you do induce with games in that short time frame to be able to back up down the track. So they've done it well. Hopefully they've done it well, and you'll see that whoever it is that gets rested can handle the next part of the year.
Brilliant stuff, Steve. Really well explained for us. As always, really appreciate it, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Steve Gravina there from Frontrunner Physiotherapy in Aussie Park. Well, that's all we've got time for on the Footy Interchange today. Eliza, thank you very much for stepping in for Scully again.
Thank you. I'm sure he'll do a number on himself soon enough, and I'll be back here.
Back in the chair. The standard in the show certainly goes up a fair few notches when you are here. So thank you very much. Great to have everyone's company. Of course, keep an eye out for the Footy Interchange Exchange, which is where we'll answer all of your questions, which will be dropping over the next couple of days or so. And you can always hit us up on social media or drop a comment in the YouTube channel as well if you want us to address something into next week. But thanks for your company right here on the Footy Interchange.